Ah, the B-movie. What an icon of memes. Being born in the distant year of 2007 and having its resurgence of popularity against all the odds in 2015 thanks to an entirely new format of jokes sweeping across the entire internet. This movie was one of the first to transcend the title of a cult classic and delves into something much more chaotic and intriguing. And yet, this film stands to be one of the most original productions produced in the last 2 decades. No, really. The more I researched into the production and livelihood of the B-movie, which oddly enough doesn't actually have the in the title, the more I came to realize just how odd this film is. And hey look, it's another yellow-colored character I can put in front of a white background. I'm genuinely surprised how far this color scheme gimmick for the series can reach. So anyway, let's get back to that ancient year of 2007, and strangely enough, I actually have a personal connection to this film. I was 11 years old when this film hit cinemas, and believe it or not, I actually watched this in the cinemas too. And guess what? I actually enjoyed it. So much so that I even bought the Wii game based off of the movie. I didn't enjoy that one. The only thing I really remember was the back of the game flaunting about a flying sequence where you had to avoid drops of rain in slow motion, which seemed really cool at the time, but when I actually played it, I realized it really wasn't worth it. And from there, I dropped it and the original film into the archives of the back of my mind, never to be remembered again. Except for when all those memes popped up. Now, let's be honest, all these jokes for the B-movie are ironic, right? This film isn't actually some masterpiece. It's just so absurd and weird that it just stands out fantastically against everything else we've seen recently, or ever, really. But this week, I bit the bullet and decided to rock up B-movie once again and watch it all the way through. Not sped up at every B mention this time around, just the full, unedited thing. And I gotta tell you, it's certainly something. So our protagonist is Barry B. Benson, of course that's his name, and he's about to finally get assigned his job as part of the Hive. After 9 days of education, he's now graduated and shown the ropes of how honey is made, but only now discovers that this will be the job he does for the rest of his life, and then he dies. So instead, he gets wrapped up in seeing the world outside of the Hive, and doing so, he accidentally meets Vanessa, a pseudo-human love interest. From there, he discovers that humans have been stealing honey and selling them in their supermarkets, and so goes through court proceedings to sue the entire human race. Doing so wilts all flowers and almost crushes nature, so in order to save the world, Barry B. Benson must help land a plane that holds the last surviving flowers to spread their pollen across the land and restore nature. Sounds like a pretty straightforward plot, right? Yeah, clearly this film has issues. This film isn't put on its massive pedestal for being the pinnacle of good storytelling. And in fact, that wasn't even the main priority of the film while it was in production. Sounds strange, right? Why would a company choose to use a storytelling medium, cram in $150 million into it, and not have the actual storytelling quality being the driving force of the entire project? Well, it's all because of Seinfeld. You know, that 9-year running American sitcom from the 1990s? Yeah, this was created by a lot of those guys. And that's the reason this film is as weird as it is. What makes this film stand out from so many other productions throughout the film industry is the fact that this film wasn't produced on numbers or executive decisions. The crew of this film had full creative freedom to do whatever they wanted with the premise or the jokes simply because they were trusted after the success of their sitcom, with our protagonist voice actor Jerry Seinfeld pretty much being at the center of it all. And he had a different approach to how he wanted this film to come out than most. He didn't want some deep cutting jokes of depth for kids to learn from, he just wanted it to be funny. He started with a quirky premise and then expanded jokes from there. B sues the human race. That's it. And you know what? I think it worked. Look at how much joy the B-movie has brought to its audience after all of its lifespan so far. Of all the films to still be talked about beyond a decade, no one could have predicted this film to be one of the highlights to crack through that barrier. And yet, here we are. So with funny being the forefront of the thrust for B-movie's production, obviously there's gonna be a whole lot of holes in other regions of the film. Namely, in just the pure logic of the story and how the world of B-movie works out. And depending on how you look at it, it's pretty stupid. Some logic pieces are integrated with jokes, like how bees live such short lives that education is literally just 3 days of each institute and that's it. And then there's things like how Barry doesn't know he'll be working this job for the rest of his life, but he knows what a box kite is. How is he miraculously surviving from being splattered on the tennis ball in all of these shots? How is Ken first distracted by bees coughing to the side? How does Barry survive most of these dangers? What are the chances that he ends up in the same apartment as the tennis players? Why do bees have the ability to speak, yet choose not to speak to humans? How does a bee win a fight against a human with attack? How does a biker discover a bee gripping onto his string? What are the odds the exposition here is so perfect? Or how does Adam the friend sting the lawyer without dying in this solo case? The answer at the end of the day is that it doesn't matter. This film is built on entertainment and nothing else. If the film is funny, then it succeeds. The specifics of the world building aren't too important, like how all of the bees have electronic connections and cameras in their antennas or something. But having every single crevice be some kind of bee-related joke is a must. Like how every haircut from the bees is either a buzz cut or a beehive hairstyle, even if it's a darker story in the background of a bee killing several people and then themselves. The point is, there are jokes aimed for all audience members. There are jokes up front and center for kids and everyone to enjoy, like the DreamWorks logo being disrupted, Ken being the most over-the-top character, or Winnie the Pooh being sniped for his thievery of honey. And then there's stuff for the older members of the audience, the more subtle stuff that flies over kids' heads, like the selection of pop culture cameo appearances that I don't entirely understand because I'm not the demographic, as well as dialogue-based commentary on mosquitoes making great lawyers for naturally being blood-sucking parasites. Or the constant undertone of sexual tension between Barry B. Benson and the human Vanessa, either through their strange interactions, the lawyer's direct accusations, or Barry's daydreams themselves. And then there's the jokes like that last one that transcend the boundaries into a whole new layer of enlightenment due to its truly iconic nature. They're the ones you probably already know. The joke narration intro of bees and aviation, the granny being slammed into the table, the suicide pact that genuinely gets contemplated in the middle of this movie, or the greatest of them all.
You like jazz?
Scratch that. You like Dazz? That's me. If you haven't already, subscribe. You've made it this far in after all, and I can tell when you're not subscribed. But let's turn back to that second to last one again, the suicide pact. It's just played off as a simple little throwaway joke to make another humorous point about bees, but you gotta admit, it's pretty damn dark for a kids movie. And I think that strange undertone of some dark adult themes is part of the many things that makes this movie so weird to watch. It's so all over the place with its themes and atmospheres that it's hard to pinpoint or follow all too clearly. But at the same time, that exact chaotic nature of the film is exactly what allowed it to reach such a bodacious level of success, if you want to call it that. And that's because of capacity to be one big giant meme. I mean, let's be honest, yeah, you don't really know this film because it struck a chord with you way back in 2007, now did it? You remember it because of 2015 and the rise of B-movie as a whole being such a strange, memey phenomenon. Now, I'm not some internet psychologist who can hyperanalyze what makes content memeable or what garners a good quality meme. I'm not entirely sure it can be put into words, especially with me only having an A-level amount of experience in psychology. But if there's one type of comedy that always seems to reign supreme on the internet, whether we like it or not, it's that lol random type of comedy. Chaotic comedy. Simple surface level puns don't tend to get the meme treatment. The easiest it gets is rhyme connectives that only expand into meme capable after being extrapolated into crazy new directions, often with chaotic results, right? Obviously not always the case for memes, but it certainly is a common factor you'll find. And B-movie just perfectly encapsulates all of that kind of chaotic nature, even if it's more toned down and dialogue based over frantic, unfathomable action sequences. Not that B-movie dodged that bullet entirely either. The rise of B-movie memes started with a shirt that simply detailed the entire script of the movie in one big condensed form. That's it. The meme wasn't so much the shirt itself, but the entire script. How many times can you imagine an entire movie script being one big meme? Not even Shrek has been exploited like that, I don't think. Clearly just the entire concept of the script was enough to make one massive cyber inside joke about. And perhaps there was the aviation meme born, with it being the iconic starter to the rest of the script. With people finding the opening of the joke to be more funny and iconic than the actual punchline to the joke the opener is setting up. And then there are your simple screenshots from people trying to fathom the concept of the B-movie moments that you probably saw off Tumblr or something. But the one piece that truly elevated B into its iconic status is YouTube, of course. With the entire B-movie, but every time they say B, it gets faster, which has now been lost to time because of YouTube spam policies. But still, at the time, it was one of the biggest things on the site, reaching number 7 on the trending page and sparking all sorts of other memes formatting in much the same way with other movie properties. Why exactly these memes were so encapsulating, I can't exactly explain. For a meme to be 7 minutes at all is already a crazy long stretch of time from the norm, but compared to a 95-minute runtime, I guess it's still pretty short. When watching it though, whether you can understand it or not, you've got to admit it's pretty chaotic. And then from there I imagine viewers only went on to see the movie more deeply, revealing all the more minute details that have since been discovered in this anomaly of a project, myself included, 4 years later. And when I went into this film this year, knowing many of the strange moments of the movie from the memes or my distant memories of 2007, I really wasn't expecting to have all too much of a good time with this movie. It was gonna be one of those ironic watches, you know, like Batman and Robin. But no, you know what? Even though it's 2019, I'm an adult now. I know good films when I see them, and the memes are stale and dead by this point. And yet, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it still. Don't get me wrong, I see what's wrong with it, and it's not exactly the best film of the 2000s, but I really enjoyed watching this film again. I guess it's still an ironically good watch, but I was still into it the whole time anyway, just to see how weird it could keep going. From the moments I knew to expect to the strange presentation of the events to the wacky events themselves. At the start of the film, we see life inside of the beehive, and there's an interesting dynamic for how the society works. We hear how the education system works, how the honey is produced in this world, and how job hunting works against the hyperactive speed of how bees operate and die. Then we hear a little bit about the genetic differences of the bees that kind of get thrown to the side, and after that, the whole beehive arc, if you can call it that, is entirely chucked away for a new plot. Barry ventures to the outside world and has his own adventure, culminating in meeting Vanessa Bloom. Of course that's her surname. For saving his life, he does what no other bee has ever done in history, not even those that were fed watered down honey to breathe life back into them, and he talks to her. And from there, they brew a friendship? And it's weird as well because Vanessa somewhat responds normally, but soon enough is perfectly fine with it. Also, the further the film progresses, the more the perspective of size gets more and more ignored. I mean, look at that suicide pact again, they practically look the same size. So yeah, a weird connection relationship is brewing, right? With Ken being the antagonistic boyfriend who's the only normal person in this whole damn movie. Dude just wants to get a job, have a yogurt day, and avoid bees because he's allergic to them. Sure, he's pretty bodacious in how he acts, but I can't help but side with the poor man. Maybe that granny really does deserve to be absolutely smashed out in a game of tennis. Still, whatever. Patrick Warburton is always golden. But I'm getting sidetracked. While these characters do linger and the relationship thing kinda continues, the plot thrusts itself forwards again in a new direction with Barry discovering repurposed honey and bids to sue the human race in a court of law. And this whole segment you'd expect to be boring, especially for kids of 2007. Yet somehow, no. The insane bundle of jokes crammed into every court scene makes it seemingly go down like a dream. From the simple bee pun names with Judge Bumbleton, voiced by Oprah Winfrey, and Sting, to the unpredictable antics of Leighton T. Montgomery, played by John Goodman, who just steals the show when seeing how he tries to defend humanity. And then there's all the events of the courtroom. A bear is unleashed into the court to fight against the use of his image in a jar, though when the case is won by the bees, they then want to end the glorification of the bear, even though they literally just wanted to help, and they did. Several celebrities make an appearance for the sake of simple humor for the adults, which admittedly really hurts the longevity of the film, but hey, they run with bee puns with their names. Unless it's Larry King later on in the movie, which establishes that he already exists and that bees have a separate bee Larry King or something. What? Other things that happen is when stalling the court, everyone is taught origami, though the defense attorney clearly can't do them. Leighton digs into the bees with bedbug comments, everyone being cousins and Barry's parents not technically being his real parents, and Adam the friend stings him right on the butt, somehow not killing him and causing the attorney to come back the next day with this on. I mean, if it wanted to keep attention going, then it certainly succeeded. Jerry Seinfeld would be great at YouTube retention optimizing. But then once the court shabuckle was sorted, it's not the end of the film, and actually takes on a realistic bad ending third act as all of nature and plants die out over bees not needing to produce honey and spread pollen all day anymore. It seems kinda rare to hear of a hero winning their arc only to discover it was leading to a bad ending anyway. I like it. Characters like Vanessa get kinda irritating here as she blames Barry despite helping him the entire way up to this point and knowing he was unaware. But the film culminates in one final sequence of helping a plane land. Seems like a whole nother movie from the past 3 premises, but okay. Here the pilots are knocked out by bee antics, and with the help of all of the bees from the hive hearing about the events on the news, they all come to help and land the plane safely. Even though it's during a thunderstorm, and we just established that bees can't fly in the rain. Also, physics truly go out of the water here as the plane moves like an insect entirely for a joke, which I think just perfectly wraps up the movie's presentation as a whole. It's chaotic, it's not meant to make sense, it's just meant to be funny. With the plane landed, the last remaining flowers are released for the bees to spread their pollen around and reinvigorate the rest of nature. Barry is a hero twice, Vanessa's flower shop is restored, Ken is devastated, Barry is living his dream life, whilst Barry is free to fly in this bigger, unhivey world. And to finish it all off, he flies through a box kite like the very first time he was released. And that's about it, really. The plot doesn't make a whole lot of sense looking at the bigger picture, but it was more like it was meticulously designed to go on such a path that every possible bee joke was all mentioned in some form. There are times when moments are too perfectly convenient or exposition is too well timed, but according to Bee Movie, it really doesn't matter. The Bee Movie doesn't care what humans think. There were other elements I'd have loved to mention, like how there's a mosquito voiced by the same guy as Osmosis Jones, which was a crazy nostalgia hit for me, or how Barry's granddad, I think, randomly appears in the family reacting to Barry on the news, seemingly out of nowhere. There's the random moment of Barry surviving being flushed by surfing on a nail filer that was just on the toilet seat, the concept of bee farms being like an office job, or the irony that beekeepers are the bad guys despite being the sole heroes in reality, the joke of Barry and Vanessa constantly snapping each other out of it, or how the events of this film causes other animals to rise up, I guess, with a cow now wanting to own all milk and Barry getting into law practices with the mosquito. Overall, it's a cacophony of weird, the chaotic neutral of all movies, and a well-grounded foundation for a 95-minute meme condensed into 7. There were talks of doing a sequel way back in 2015, but I think Jerry and the others agreed that adding on any more would only damage the magic of the original. And though I'm sure sales would be through the roof to see a Bee Movie 2, it's as we said at the start. With this production, it's not about numbers or executive decisions, it's full creative freedom. The first movie was enough to keep us entertained for well over a decade, and a second would simply take away from the art that was already created. And yes, the Bee Movie is art. And so with that, the Bee Movie is not coming back. My name's been Dazz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit. It looks like we're getting close to reaching 100,000 subscribers before the end of the year. That is insane. Thank you so much if you've been watching recently or just in general. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And if you're not subscribed but you've made it this far, totally got to subscribe and get into the under 100,000 club. That is an amazing number. Wow.